The moment the man took off his shirt and revealed the scars covering his body, the police officer at the door felt a chill run down his spine. The man slowly turned around with his hands raised over his head, but the deputy suddenly swung his baton and struck the man repeatedly. That was not the end of it. They even used a cold high-pressure water hose to torment him. Watching the man suffer, their faces were filled with mockery and amusement. In their eyes, he was no different from a weak homeless drifter. What they did not realize was that they had just provoked the wrong man. The man's name was Rambo. He was a veteran who had just returned from the Vietnam War. On the battlefield, he had once been one of the nation's most effective killing machines, but now he was wandering from place to place, simply trying to find a job. During his journey, he passed through a small town and hoped to go in for a hot meal, but he was stopped by the town sheriff, Harry. Harry disliked Rambo's long hair and unkempt appearance. He immediately assumed that Rambo was just a troublemaking drifter. To prevent him from staying in the town, Harry offered to give him a ride. Along the way, Harry constantly insulted Rambo with his words. He hinted that Rambo was exactly the kind of drifter who would bring trouble to the town. Soon he drove Rambo across a bridge far from the town and forced him out of the patrol car. Before leaving, he warned Rambo not to step into the town again, otherwise he would definitely arrest him and bring him to the station. Rambo remained silent. After Harry drove away, he looked around at the empty surroundings. A moment later, he made up his mind and walked back toward the town. Harry noticed Rambo's figure in his rearview mirror. Furious, he immediately turned the car around and chased after him. He ordered Rambo to place his hands on the car for inspection. Although Rambo felt deeply humiliated, he still placed his hands on the roof of the car, hoping to avoid trouble. During the search, Harry found a military knife on him. Even though Rambo explained that he used it for hunting, Harry still arrested him for carrying a prohibited weapon. Rambo was taken to the interrogation room. Deputy Galt arrogantly demanded to know his name. For a moment, Rambo's eyes showed a distant look. It was not because he was afraid of the police. The window in front of him reminded him of the interrogations and suffering he had endured in a prisoner of war camp in Vietnam. A police officer tried to take away his identification tag. Rambo had no choice but to let him take it. Only then did Galt realize that he was a veteran of the Vietnam War. But at that time, anti-war sentiment was strong across the United States. Even those who had fought bravely for their country often received little respect, especially from people in power in small towns like this. Rambo's identity as a soldier directly challenged Galt's authority, so he threw Rambo into a jail cell. He ordered his men to shave Rambo's hair with a razor. As Rambo struggled, his fear grew stronger. The sharp blade in front of him triggered painful memories of the torture he had experienced in the prisoner of war camp. At that moment, he could no longer control his anger. Galt grabbed a gun and chased after him. He aimed at Rambo and was about to fire, but Harry stopped him just in time. It was not because he was worried about hurting Rambo. He simply did not want a stray bullet to injure innocent townspeople over a drifter. Harry jumped into his patrol car and chased after him. The pursuit quickly moved far away from the town. Seeing the situation escalate, Harry immediately called for backup over the radio. After reporting the direction of Rambo's escape, he drove his car through a fence and continued the chase. When Rambo saw that Harry was chasing him on foot, he quickly got up and ran into the forest. Relying on his exceptional physical strength, he soon disappeared deep into the woods. Realizing that Rambo had vanished, Harry became furious with embarrassment. He shouted threats into the forest, vowing that Rambo would pay a heavy price. After entering the mountains, Rambo found an abandoned mining site. The freezing winter air quickly drained his body heat. He searched the area for anything useful. Eventually, he found a discarded piece of cloth. Using his military knife, he cut it apart and quickly made a simple shirt to keep himself warm. Afterward, he continued moving along the mountain stream, trying to put as much distance as possible between himself and the town. Meanwhile, Harry's backup units had already arrived. They believed capturing Rambo would be easy this time. At that moment, Rambo was beginning to lose his sense of direction. He pulled a compass out of the knife handle. He needed to know his position at all times. But suddenly, the barking of dogs echoed from the mountain below. Seeing that the police were getting closer and closer, Rambo did not dare slow down for even a moment. He climbed rapidly toward the mountain peak, but when he finally reached the top, he discovered that a deep and endless cliff stood in front of him. The dangerous situation filled Rambo with frustration. Even worse, Harry and his men had already caught up with him. Even worse, a helicopter slowly flew in from the valley. Inside the cabin sat Galt. Rambo had humiliated him at the police station, and this was the perfect chance for revenge. When Rambo saw the helicopter approaching him, he anxiously looked around for a way out. Meanwhile, Galt had already raised his sniper rifle, but the air currents in the valley were unstable, and the helicopter swayed violently.
Hold it steady, you son of a bitch! Get closer and hold it steady!
Suddenly, Galt lost his balance and fell straight out of the helicopter. The pilot did not dare stay any longer and quickly flew away. Rambo rushed forward to check. Galt was no longer breathing. Rambo casually took his weapon and jacket and quickly left the area. Harry soon arrived at the cliff with his man. Using binoculars, he saw Galt's body lying below. Only then did he realize that this time he had provoked someone he should never have challenged. By then, Rambo had already hidden behind a massive rock. He took a needle and thread from the handle of his knife and began stitching the scratches on his arm. After quickly treating the wound, he stepped out and tried to make peace with Harry. He hoped the matter could end right there. One person had already died, and he did not want anyone else to get hurt. But Harry suddenly opened fire at him. The bullet grazed Rambo's scalp. With no other choice, Rambo had to escape again. Harry called in another helicopter to continue the search for Rambo, but soon the police station sent over Rambo's file. The report showed that Rambo was not only a Vietnam War veteran, but also a member of a special forces unit. He had even received a congressional medal. He was a true combat hero. Harry hesitated for a moment, but still ordered the search to continue. One of the officers nearby suggested reporting the matter to their superiors. That only made Harry even angrier. He dragged the officer over to Galt's body and shouted that they had to avenge him. He swore that they would capture Rambo no matter what. What he did not realize was that Rambo had already begun preparing for the next battle. Meanwhile, Harry's search team spread through the forest with hunting dogs. When lightning flashed across the mountains, an officer noticed a shadow moving deep in the woods. The three hunting dogs began barking wildly. Two of them rushed toward the moving figure. When lightning illuminated the forest again, they realized the figure was just a dummy made of cloth. The officer released the last hunting dog, hoping it would track Rambo down, but in the dark forest filled with thunder and lightning, he soon heard the dog crying out in distress. This time Harry heard no gunshots. He assumed that Rambo had run out of ammunition, so he led his men deeper into the forest to continue the search.
Somebody help me!
Soon Harry heard someone calling for help. He rushed over to assist, without realizing that the officer behind him had already been captured. When Harry found the officer trapped by a hidden snare, he helped pull a wooden spike out of the man's thigh. Only then did he remember the officer who had been walking behind him. But when he hurried to search the area, he discovered that the officer had already been tightly tied to a tree. Harry stepped forward to rescue him, but suddenly, Rambo emerged from the shadows and pinned him down with his military knife. Rambo warned him to stop pushing the situation further. He told him to end everything right there, otherwise, he would make Harry experience the true pain of war. Harry sat on the ground and covered his face in despair, but even then, he refused to give up. The next day, he set up a command post outside the forest. He called in a large number of police officers, as well as National Guard troops. Ambulances carried away the injured officers. Under the coverage of the news media, the story quickly spread across the city. Reports said that a war veteran had caused chaos at the town's police station and was responsible for Galt's death. To prevent the situation from escalating, the Department of Defense sent Colonel Troutman to end the conflict. He was Rambo's former commanding officer, and the man who had trained him into an elite soldier. When Troutman learned that only one officer had died so far, he found it rather strange, because the Rambo he once knew never left enemies alive. To resolve the crisis as quickly as possible, Troutman suggested allowing Rambo to leave the forest first, and then intercepting him later. Otherwise, more officers would only lose their lives. Although Harry felt uneasy hearing those words, he still refused to abandon the search. He asked Troutman to contact Rambo over the radio, because Rambo had taken one of the radios earlier. As long as Troutman could get Rambo to speak over the radio, they could track his location. Troutman did not seem concerned, because he knew very well that sending more people after Rambo would only lead to more casualties. Using the method of a military roll call, Troutman began calling Rambo over the radio. At that moment, Rambo was resting inside a cave. After hesitating for a moment, he finally responded.
They're all gone, sir.
Troutman did not know how to comfort him, so he began talking about their time in the military. He tried to use their bond to persuade Rambo to surrender voluntarily. Troutman also promised that Rambo would receive a fair trial. Although Rambo trusted Troutman, he did not trust the world around him. All he had wanted was to enter the town and have a hot meal, but Harry had targeted him from the very beginning. If not for him, none of this trouble would have happened. After saying that, Rambo turned off the radio. By then, the technicians had already located his position. Harry declared that at daybreak, he would send everyone into the mountains and capture Rambo with overwhelming force. Early the next morning, a large number of National Guard soldiers entered the valley to begin the search. Rambo, hiding near a dry riverbed, noticed them immediately. He quickly ran back toward the cave, but the soldiers behind him soon spotted his movement.
Rambo! Your last chance to come out!
The team leader then pulled out a rocket launcher. He planned to blow up the entire cave, with Rambo still inside.
Whoa! Yeah! Bullseye!
Soon, Harry and Troutman arrived by helicopter. Everyone believed that Rambo had been killed in the explosion. Only Troutman showed a faint smile, because he understood Rambo's abilities better than anyone. And just as Troutman expected, Rambo had survived inside the mine. He lit a piece of cloth and wrapped it around his military knife to make a torch. After searching for a while, he discovered half a barrel of fuel. He quickly took off his jacket and tore it into strips. He soaked the cloth in the fuel and used it as fuel for the torch. Holding the torch, he searched the mine for an exit. Before long, he found a vertical shaft that could serve as an escape route. At that moment, a desire for revenge began to grow in Rambo's mind. After emerging from the mine, Rambo noticed that the National Guard was withdrawing. With a powerful leap, he jumped onto the roof of the last truck. After realizing the truck was loaded with weapons, Rambo pushed the driver out of the vehicle. Then he slammed the accelerator and drove straight toward the town. He wanted those officers to face the consequences of their actions. The driver who had been pushed out ran along the road and happened to encounter a passing police car. The police station soon received the news that Rambo was still alive. Harry immediately ordered his men to set up a roadblock at the bridge. Rambo first drove the truck into a gas station. He deliberately crashed into a fuel tank, allowing gasoline to spill everywhere. Then he took a heavy machine gun from the truck bed. Finally, he set fire to the gas station, along with the remaining weapons. With a massive explosion, the entire gas station was instantly engulfed in flames. The officers at the police station heard the blast and quickly rushed out to respond. Harry knew that Rambo was coming for him, so he took a weapon and hid on the rooftop. He planned to wait there for Rambo. When Rambo arrived outside the police station, he first shot the electrical box, cutting off the power. The entire town was suddenly plunged into darkness, but Rambo did not rush into the station. Instead, he broke into a nearby gun shop. He gathered all the ammunition and gunpowder and piled them on the floor. Then he laid a trail of powder as a fuse. Moments later, a powerful explosion destroyed the entire shop. Harry could only hide in the corner of a wall and watch everything happen. What he did not realize was that Rambo had already discovered his position. Rambo quietly moved behind the police station. He set up the heavy machine gun and began firing relentlessly at the building. Days of suppressed anger finally poured out. As the gunfire finally stopped, Harry quickly changed his position and aimed his weapon at the skylight. He believed that as long as Rambo entered the station, he would have a chance to take him down.
Rambo, don't do it.
Just as he was about to fire, Troutman suddenly appeared and stopped him. If he killed Harry, his life would be ruined forever. By then, a large number of police officers had already surrounded the area, but Rambo showed no fear. He calmly checked his weapons, his eyes filled with determination. Troutman walked to the window and saw that there were at least 200 officers outside. He knew that no matter how strong Rambo was, if a battle began, it would end with him being overwhelmed. At that moment, Rambo could no longer hold back. He finally released the frustration buried deep in his heart. On the battlefield, he had fought and sacrificed everything for his country, but after returning home, he found himself rejected everywhere he went. During the war, he had operated machines worth millions of dollars. Yet after coming back, he could not even find a simple job washing cars. He could not even get a hot meal without being turned away. He described the humiliation he had faced at the airport when he first returned home. His voice was filled with anger, but also confusion and pain. "We love our country, and our country should love us too." These words spoke for countless Vietnam veterans. Rambo's accusation was not only directed at Harry and this small town, it was also directed at the entire system, at a nation that had sent them to war, yet struggled to accept them when they came home. Troutman listened quietly and did not interrupt Rambo's emotional release, because he knew this was the first time in many years that Rambo had the chance to speak about the pain in his heart. In the end, Rambo broke down and began to cry. This strong and unyielding man held onto the only person who truly understood him and cried like a child. At the end of the story, Troutman walked with him out of the police station to surrender to the authorities. This battle of one man against an entire system had finally come to an end.